My name is Curtis Adams, a 22-year-old architectural student from Boston, with big dreams and a family that never noticed them. I spent weeks looking forward to my birthday dinner, hoping this year would be different. Little did I know, my parents had already decided my birthday cake would become my brother Jason's congratulations cake. The inheritance letter from my grandfather burned in my bag as my mother screamed those familiar words. You are just jealous of your perfect brother. If you are watching this now, drop a comment telling me where you are from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal and unexpected revenge that changed everything. Growing up in the shadow of Jason Adams was like living as a permanent understudy who never got to perform. From the moment my older brother scored his first perfect test in elementary school, my parents decided they had already produced their masterpiece. Jason was 13 years older than me, and by the time I was forming memories, he was already winning science competitions and making our parents beam with pride. Our childhood home in suburban Boston was practically a shrine to Jason. The walls of our living room displayed his certificates, trophies, and academic achievements. My mother, Diana, a high school English teacher, would tell anyone who would listen about her brilliant son who was destined to become a doctor. My father, Robert, an accountant, had mapped out Jason's entire future before I was even born. Your brother is going to Harvard Medical School. My father would announce at family gatherings, as if Jason had already been accepted despite being only in middle school at the time. He is going to be the best surgeon this family has ever produced. Meanwhile, my report cards with mostly B's and occasional A's were met with questions about why they were not all A's. My interest in buildings and design was dismissed as doodling. When I built elaborate structures with blocks as a child, my mother would simply move them aside to make room for dinner. While she had once photographed a science project Jason made from popsicle sticks, by the time Jason actually did get into Harvard Medical School, I was 12 and had already accepted my place as the family afterthought. I still remember the celebration party my parents threw, inviting everyone they knew. I spent that evening serving punch to guests who ruffled my hair and asked if I would follow in my brother's footsteps. Not everyone can be exceptional like Jason. My mother once told a curious neighbor who asked about my interests. I stood there holding my first architectural sketch, which I had been about to show her. Only my grandfather, Thomas, ever seemed to see me. A successful architect himself, he noticed my interest in buildings from an early age. When I was 14, he started secretly mentoring me, taking me to his firm on weekends, teaching me about design principles, and introducing me to his colleagues. You have the eye, Curtis, he would say, examining my sketches. You see spaces differently. That is a gift. At 18, when I announced I had been accepted to Boston Architectural College, my parents seemed almost disappointed. Are you sure you would not rather try pre-med? My father asked. There is still time to change your mind. My grandfather, however, took me out to celebrate. They will see your talent eventually, he promised. Sometimes, people only recognize value when others point it out first. Now, 3 months after my grandfather's passing, I found myself preparing for my 22nd birthday. With modest expectations, I had long since stopped hoping for the kind of celebrations Jason received. But birthdays were still supposedly about me, at least in theory. The morning of my birthday, I received a call from my best friend Dominic. Happy birthday, man, he exclaimed. What are the plans tonight? Want to hit that new bar after your family thing? Thanks, Dom. Maybe, I replied, putting the final touches on a project due next week. Dinner with the family first. Who knows? Maybe this year, they will actually remember to get a cake. Dominic snorted. Remember last year when they got you that tiny cupcake because they spent the cake budget on Jason's new stethoscope? I laughed, despite myself. To be fair, it was a very expensive stethoscope. Well, you deserve an actual celebration this year, Dominic insisted. You won that student design competition last month. That is huge, Curtis. If they do not make a big deal about it, we will. The design competition had been a significant achievement. My sustainable urban housing concept had beaten entries from students across the Northeast. My grandfather had been the first person I called with the news, but he had been too ill to fully comprehend it. My parents had acknowledged it with distracted congratulations while watching one of Jason's interviews on a local medical program. "Thanks, Dom," I said. I am not getting my hopes up, though. After hanging up, I found myself thinking about birthdays past. My 16th birthday had coincided with Jason's medical school graduation. So, my celebration had been a small dinner at home after his massive graduation party. My 18th had been overshadowed by Jason starting his residency. My 21st, traditionally a milestone, had been a quick cake after dinner because my parents were tired from attending a ceremony where Jason received a research award earlier that day. Despite everything, I found myself hoping that turning 22 might somehow be different. Grandfather had always made my birthday special, taking me to architectural landmarks or introducing me to professional architects he knew. This would be my first birthday without him, and I felt his absence keenly. I dressed in my nicest button-up shirt and slacks, tucking my grandfather's letter into my messenger bag almost as a talisman. He had given it to me a week before he died, making me promise not to open it until my birthday. "This will help you stand on your own 2 feet," he had whispered from his hospital bed. With a final glance in the mirror, I headed to my car. My parents had insisted I come early to help my mother prepare for dinner. Jason, of course, would arrive just in time to eat. Some things never changed. But I drove to my parents' house with a small spark of hope that perhaps, just this once, the day might actually be about me. I arrived at my parents' colonial-style home in Wellesley at precisely 4:30, just as my mother had requested. The familiar 2-story house with its meticulous landscaping looked different somehow. There were balloons tied to the mailbox, which surprised me. My birthdays rarely warranted exterior decorations. Maybe they are actually making an effort this year, I murmured to myself. As I parked behind my father's BMW, walking up the stone path to the front door, I noticed other unusual details. Through the window, I could see what looked like a banner hanging in the living room. My chest tightened with unexpected emotion. Had they actually planned something special? I used my key to enter, calling out as I stepped into the foyer. "Mom, Dad, I am here to help." My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked flustered, her normally perfect bob slightly disheveled. "Curtis, you are early." I checked my watch, confused. "You said 4:30. Did I?" She looked distracted, glancing over her shoulder toward the kitchen. "Well, since you are here, you can help your father hang the rest of the decorations." I followed her gaze and froze. The banner I had glimpsed from outside was now fully visible, stretching across the living room wall. It read, "Congratulations, Dr. Jason." My stomach dropped as I took in the rest of the decorations. Blue and silver streamers, the colors of the hospital where Jason worked, adorned the ceiling. A table had been set up with what appeared to be medical-themed decorations, including miniature stethoscopes and a centerpiece shaped like a caduceus. "What is all this?" I asked, my voice suddenly hoarse. My father appeared from the dining room, holding more streamers. "Curtis, good. You can help with these. Your brother got the promotion to chief resident, youngest one in the history of Massachusetts General Hospital. That island? Great," I managed, still trying to process what was happening. "But I thought tonight was my birthday dinner?" My parents exchanged a quick glance that I had learned to recognize over the years. It was their Curtis's being difficult look. "Of course it is still your birthday dinner," my mother said, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. "We are just combining celebrations. Efficient, right? Now, help your father while I finish the food." Numbly, I took the streamers from my father and followed his instructions about where to hang them. As we worked, He chatted excitedly about Jason's promotion and what it meant for his career. Chief resident at 35, my father kept repeating, and the director hinted he is on track for department head within 5 years. Department head? Curtis? I nodded automatically, my mind still struggling to accept that my birthday had once again been hijacked. As I stood on a chair to attach streamers to the ceiling, I caught sight of the dining room. The table was set with the good china, crystal glasses, and silver candlesticks that only came out for special occasions. Special occasions that usually involve Jason. Is anyone else coming tonight? I asked, hoping to steer the conversation away from my brother for just a moment. Oh yes. My mother called from the kitchen. Your aunt and uncle, your cousins, and Jason is bringing Allison. Did we tell you they are engaged? Such a lovely girl. Works as a pediatric nurse. They met at the hospital. Of course, they had not told me. I was always the last to know family news. I stepped down from the chair and walked to the kitchen, determined to at least remind them of the original purpose of the evening. Mom, did you get a cake? I asked, trying to sound casual. For my birthday? She was furiously chopping vegetables, her movements precise and focused. Yes, of course. It is in the refrigerator. I moved to open the refrigerator door, but she quickly stepped in front of me. Do not peek. It is a surprise. Something in her tone made me suspicious, but before I could press further, the doorbell rang. That must be Jason, my mother exclaimed, her whole demeanor changing instantly. She untied her apron, smoothed her hair, and hurried to the door. I followed more slowly, watching as she flung open the door and enveloped my brother in an enthusiastic hug. Jason stood there, tall and confident in his expensive suit, his arm around a pretty blonde woman I assumed was Allison. My brilliant boy, my mother gushed. Chief resident, we are so proud. My father rushed to join the greeting, pumping Jason's hand and pulling him into a backslapping hug. The youngest chief resident in hospital history. I hung back, waiting to be noticed. Finally, Jason looked over and gave me a casual nod. Hey, little brother, happy birthday. At least he remembered. Thanks, I replied. And congratulations on the promotion. Curtis, come meet Allison, Jason said, gesturing to the woman beside him. Allison, this is my kid brother, Curtis. Allison smiled warmly and extended her hand. Happy birthday. Jason mentioned it was today. What a fun coincidence to celebrate together. Her genuineness caught me off guard. Thank you. Nice to meet you, as my parents ushered Jason and Allison into the living room, showering them with questions about the promotion and their engagement. I slipped into the kitchen. Despite my mother's warning, I opened the refrigerator. There, on the middle shelf, sat a large cake box from the expensive bakery across town. Heart-pounding, I carefully lifted the lid. The cake inside was beautifully decorated in blue and silver, with the words, "Congratulations, Dr. Jason," written in elegant script across the top. There was no mention of my birthday anywhere. I stared at it for a long moment, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. They had not combined celebrations. They had replaced mine entirely. Curtis, what are you doing? I turned to find my mother standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of annoyance and guilt. There is no birthday cake, I said quietly. She sighed impatiently. We thought it made more sense to celebrate Jason's achievement. It is such a big deal, Curtis. You have a birthday every year. But your brother does not get promoted to chief resident every day. I have a birthday every year, but you have never actually celebrated it, I replied, surprised by my own boldness. My mother's face hardened. That is not true. We always acknowledge your birthday. Acknowledge, not celebrate. You are being childish, she snapped. This is exactly why we focus on Jason's achievements. He appreciates what we do for him instead of complaining. The doorbell rang again, saving me from responding. My mother gave me a final disapproving look. Put the cake back and come say hello to your aunt and uncle. And try to look happy for your brother. As she left, I carefully replaced the cake in the refrigerator. My hand brushed against my messenger bag, and I felt the outline of my grandfather's letter. Somehow, its presence gave me strength. Throughout the next hour, more relatives arrived, all of them buzzing with excitement about Jason's promotion. My Uncle Frank, my mother's brother, was the only one who seemed to remember the original purpose of the gathering. "Happy birthday, Curtis," he said, handing me a small wrapped package. 22, right? That is a good age. "Thanks, Uncle Frank," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. As we moved to the dining room, I realized that even the seating arrangement emphasized my secondary status. Jason and Allison were seated at my father's right hand, in the positions of honor, while I was relegated to the far end of the table, next to my younger cousins. The final blow came when my father stood to give a toast. Raising his glass, he beamed at Jason. "To my son, the youngest chief resident in Massachusetts General Hospital history. Your mother and I always knew you were destined for greatness." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the congratulations. No one mentioned my birthday. Not even my father. As we began to eat, I sat silently, pushing food around my plate, while conversation flowed around me. Jason dominated the discussion, sharing stories about difficult surgeries and important patients, while my parents gazed at him adoringly. When I attempted to mention my recent design award, my mother smiled distractedly and immediately turned back to Jason, asking about his engagement plans. My phone buzzed with birthday messages from friends. Dominic had texted, "How's the family birthday dinner going? Still on for drinks after?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How could I explain that my birthday dinner had become my brother's promotion party? That my own parents had forgotten to get me a birthday cake? As I sat there, surrounded by family but feeling completely alone, I realized nothing was going to change. In this family, I would always be an afterthought, forever in Jason's shadow. That realization should have crushed me. Instead, it left me feeling strangely calm. Perhaps it was time to stop hoping for recognition that would never come. Perhaps it was time to find my own path, just as my grandfather had suggested. The dinner progressed like a play where everyone knew their lines except for me. My Aunt Clara gushed about how Jason looked exactly like a television doctor. My cousins peppered him with questions about gruesome surgeries, which he answered with practiced charm. My father repeatedly mentioned how Jason's career was taking off even faster than we predicted. I sat at my end of the table, watching it all unfold with growing detachment. Years of practice had taught me how to fade into the background at family gatherings, to become nearly invisible. Usually, I accepted this role, but something felt different tonight. Perhaps it was turning 22. Or perhaps it was the weight of my grandfather's letter in my bag. But I found myself unwilling to disappear completely. When the conversation briefly lulled, I cleared my throat. I finished my design for the urban renewal project last week. My professor thinks it has a good chance at the national competition. The table went quiet for a moment. My mother looked up from her plate with a tight smile. "That is nice, Curtis. Jason, tell everyone about that difficult surgery you performed last month, the one with the state senator." And just like that, I was erased from the conversation again. Jason launched into a detailed description of a complicated procedure, using medical terminology that impressed everyone at the table, even though I doubted most of them understood half of what he was saying. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group message from my architecture classmates, wishing me happy birthday and asking if I was having a good celebration. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. As Jason continued his story, I caught my Uncle Frank watching me with a sympathetic expression. Unlike the rest of the family, Uncle Frank had always shown genuine interest in my architectural pursuits. He had even attended the small exhibition where my sustainable housing design had won first place, a recognition my parents had been too busy to witness. When Jason finally finished his medical monologue to enthusiastic applause, Uncle Frank deliberately turned to me. "Curtis, tell me more about this competition project of yours. Is it similar to the sustainable housing concept you showed me?" Before I could answer, my mother interrupted. "Frank, you should see the engagement ring Jason bought for Allison. Show them, dear." As Allison obligingly extended her hand to display a diamond that probably cost more than my entire college tuition, I exchanged a knowing glance with Uncle Frank. He gave me a subtle nod that somehow conveyed both apology and encouragement. The pattern continued throughout dinner. Every attempt I made to participate in the conversation was swiftly redirected to Jason or his achievements. By the time dessert approached, I had given up trying. Instead, I found myself mentally reviewing the contents of my apartment, considering what I would need if I decided to never return to this house again. "Excuse me," I said quietly, standing up. "I need to use the restroom." No one acknowledged my departure except Uncle Frank, who gave me another sympathetic glance. In the privacy of the bathroom, I leaned against the sink and took several deep breaths. The face that looked back at me from the mirror seemed different somehow. Older, perhaps, or simply more resolved. Almost without conscious decision, I reached into my messenger bag and removed my grandfather's letter. The envelope was heavy, made of expensive stationery bearing the embossed logo of his architectural firm. For 3 months, I had honored his request not to open it until my birthday. Now seemed as good a time as any. Carefully breaking the seal, I removed several folded pages covered in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. The first page began, "My dear Curtis, if you are reading this, I have passed on, and you have reached your 22nd birthday. First, let me wish you a happy birthday. You have always been special to me, not because you are my grandson, but because I recognize in you the same passion for architecture that has driven my own life. What your parents have never understood is that true success is not measured by titles or social recognition, but by the impact we have on the world around us. Your designs, even at this young age, show a thoughtfulness and innovation that took me decades to develop." I blinked back unexpected tears as I scanned the rest of the first page, which contained personal reflections and memories of our time together. But it was the second page that made my breath catch. Now to business matters. As you know, I built Adams Architectural Design from nothing into one of the most respected firms in New England. What you do not know is that for the past 4 years, I have been preparing for your eventual leadership of the company. Curtis, I am leaving you my controlling interest in the firm, along with the contents of my private accounts and my home in Cambridge. The legal documents are with my attorney, Margaret Wilson, whose contact information is included below. She will guide you through the process once you are ready. I stared at the page in disbelief. My grandfather had left me his firm, the successful business my parents had always assumed would be sold upon his death, with the proceeds divided among family members. The final pages contained more details about the inheritance, along with my grandfather's advice about running the company and developing my own architectural vision. His closing words resonated deeply. "You have always lived in the shadow of your brother, not because you lack talent or character, but because your parents could only see one kind of success. Now is your time to step into the light of your own making. You are ready, Curtis. I have always believed in you. With love and confidence, your grandfather, Thomas Adams." I carefully refolded the letter and returned it to my bag, my mind racing. All this time, while my parents had been dismissing my architectural ambitions, my grandfather had been preparing me to take over his legacy. A knock on the bathroom door startled me back to the present. "Curtis?" It was Uncle Frank. Your mother is about to bring out the cake. You might want to come back. Thanks, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. I will be right there. As I returned to the dining room, I felt strangely calm. The letter had changed everything and nothing at the same time. My family's dynamics remained the same, but my place within them, or perhaps outside them, was clearer than ever before. I took my seat just as my mother emerged from the kitchen, carrying the elaborate blue and silver cake I had discovered earlier. Here we are, she announced cheerfully. A special cake for a special occasion. Everyone clapped as she placed it in front of Jason. I watched silently as my father handed him a knife to make the first cut. Wait, Uncle Frank said suddenly. Are we not going to acknowledge Curtis's birthday too? It is the reason we originally gathered tonight, right? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother's smile tightened. Of course we remember Curtis's birthday, but since Jason's news is so significant, we thought it made sense to focus on that. So there is no birthday cake for Curtis? Uncle Frank pressed. My mother's expression hardened. Frank, do not make this difficult. Curtis understands that sometimes bigger events take precedence. Actually, I said quietly, I do not understand that. Not anymore. All eyes turned to me in surprise. I rarely challenged my parents, especially in front of others. My father frowned. Curtis, this is not the time. When is the time, Dad? My birthdays get overshadowed every year. Last year, it was Jason's research award. The year before that, it was his new position. Before that, his graduation, his acceptance to medical school, the list goes on. That is not fair, my mother protested. We always acknowledge your birthday. Acknowledge. Yes. Celebrate. No. I was echoing our earlier conversation, but this time with witnesses. You replaced my birthday cake with a congratulations cake for Jason. You moved me to the end of the table in my own birthday dinner. No one even toasted my birthday. Jason finally seemed to notice the tension. Hey, come on, little brother. Do not be so sensitive. We can sing happy birthday too. Right, Mom? His condescending tone only fueled my determination. That is not the point, Jason. The point is that nothing I do is ever good enough for this family. I won a major design competition last month, but none of you even noticed. My mother sighed dramatically. Curtis, please do not turn this lovely evening into a scene about your jealousy issues. Jealousy? I repeated. Is that what you think this is about? Well, what else could it be? She retorted. Your brother works incredibly hard and achieves great things. If you applied yourself half as much as Jason does, perhaps you would have accomplishments worth celebrating too. The room went silent. Even Jason looked uncomfortable with her bluntness. It was the same message I had heard my entire life, just usually delivered with more subtlety. But tonight, hearing it stated so explicitly in front of everyone, while sitting at what was supposed to be my birthday dinner, something inside me finally broke free. You know, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Grandpa once told me that the hardest people to impress are those who have already decided not to be impressed. I guess he was right. The silence that followed my statement hung heavy in the air. My mother recovered first, her face flushing with anger. Do not bring your grandfather into this, she said sharply. This is about your attitude, not ours. I looked around the table at my relatives, most of whom were staring intently at their plates or wine glasses, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Only Uncle Frank met my gaze, giving me a slight nod of encouragement. My attitude? I repeated. I came here tonight expecting a simple birthday dinner. Instead, I found a full-blown celebration for Jason, complete with decorations, special cake, and family members who had no idea today was even my birthday. And I am the one with the attitude problem? My father cleared his throat. Curtis, you are making a mountain out of a molehill. It is just a cake. It is not just a cake, Dad. It is 22 years of being treated like I do not matter. Jason, ever the peacemaker when family tensions threatened to overshadow his spotlight, attempted to intervene. Look, we can cut this cake together, Curtis. Or we can go get another cake after dinner. Right, Mom? My mother nodded quickly. Of course. We can go to that 24-hour supermarket and get a small cake for Curtis, too. The casual dismissal in her words, a small cake as an afterthought, purchased from a supermarket. While Jason's elaborate creation came from the city's most expensive bakery, only highlighted the disparity in how they valued us. I do not want a last-minute cake, I said quietly. I want parents who are as proud of me as they are of Jason. Just once, I would like to feel like my achievements matter in this family. My father sighed impatiently. What achievements, Curtis? Jason saves lives. He is at the top of his field. What have you done that compares to that? The bluntness of his question struck me like a physical blow, but I refused to flinch. Last month, I won the Northeast Regional Architectural Student Competition. My sustainable urban housing design was selected from over 300 entries. The prize includes a $10,000 scholarship and publication in Architectural Review. I looked at my parents' blank expressions and knew immediately that they had completely forgotten about my competition, if they had ever registered it at all. That island. Nice, my mother said, after an awkward pause. But surely you understand that being named chief resident at a major hospital is a much more significant accomplishment. Allison, who had been silent throughout most of the exchange, suddenly spoke up. I think Curtis's award sounds impressive. My cousin is an architect, and she says those student competitions are extremely competitive. I gave her a grateful glance, surprised by the unexpected support. My mother's lips tightened. Well, of course it is a nice achievement for a student project. We are just saying that, in the real world, Jason's work has actual impact. Architecture has no impact? I asked incredulously. The buildings where people live, work, and heal do not matter? Grandpa's firm designed the East Wing of Massachusetts General Hospital, where Jason works. At the mention of my grandfather again, my mother's expression darkened. Your grandfather filled your head with unrealistic expectations, Curtis. Not everyone can run a successful firm like he did. He made you think you could just step into that world without paying your dues. Mom, Jason interjected, seemingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I am sure Curtis works hard too. His patronizing tone only made things worse. He was 13 years older than me, but sometimes he spoke to me as if I were still a child. You know, Jason, I said, turning to my brother, the difference between us is not that you work harder or that your field is more important. The difference is that you had parents who supported your dreams from day one, while I had to find that support elsewhere. My mother stood up abruptly. That is enough. I will not sit here and be accused of being a bad parent simply because we recognize exceptional talent when we see it. You never even tried to see my talent, I replied. Grandpa did. He believed in me when no one else in this family did. My father's face reddened. Your grandfather was becoming senile toward the end, Curtis. Whatever he told you about your prospects was likely colored by his declining mental state. The casual dismissal of my grandfather's judgment, the insinuation that he could only have believed in me due to mental deterioration, was the final straw. Grandpa was sharper at 90 than either of you have ever been, I said, rising from my chair. He saw potential in me that you were too blinded by your worship of Jason to notice. Curtis, my mother gasped. How dare you speak to us that way? How dare I? How dare you replace my birthday cake with a celebration for Jason? How dare you dismiss my achievements year after year? How dare you insult Grandpa's judgment when he built the business that paid for Jason's medical school and this house? Jason stood now too, his doctor voice in full effect. The calm, authoritative tone he probably used with difficult patients. Curtis, you need to calm down. You are being irrational, and frankly, you are embarrassing yourself. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. There at Island, the classic Jason move questioned my mental stability, rather than considering that I might actually have a valid point. You are jealous, my mother declared, her voice rising. You have always been jealous of your brother's success, instead of working to create your own. You are right about one thing, Mom, I said, my voice suddenly calm. I have not created my own success yet, but that is about to change. I reached for my messenger bag and pulled out my grandfather's letter, holding it up, but not handing it over. Grandpa believed in me enough to leave me something important, something that will help me build my own path. My father's expression changed instantly from anger to sudden interest. Thomas left you something? What did he leave you? The naked greed in his voice confirmed everything I had been feeling. All these years, they had tolerated me as an obligation, overlooked me as unimportant, and now they were only interested when they thought there might be something of value. That is between Grandpa and me, I replied, returning the letter to my bag. Just like my future is between me and me. My mother's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful child. After everything we have done for you, your education, your apartment, your car, and this is how you repay us? By ruining your brother's special night with your petty jealousy? You are just jealous of your perfect brother, she continued, her voice rising to a shout. You always have been. The dining room fell completely silent. Even my mother seemed shocked by her outburst. I looked around at the faces of my relatives, all uncomfortable, some pitying, none defending me, and felt a strange sense of liberation. I am not jealous of Jason, I said quietly. I am sad for all of us. For him, growing up with the crushing weight of your expectations. For you, unable to see value in anything that does not fit your narrow definition of success. And for me, wasting years trying to earn approval that was never going to come. I picked up my messenger bag and slung it over my shoulder. Curtis, where are you going? My father demanded. We are not finished here. Actually, Dad, I think we are. For the first time in my life, I am finished here. Curtis Adams, you sit back down right now, my mother commanded, using the full name technique that had intimidated me as a child. We are having a family dinner. No, I replied simply. You are having a celebration for Jason. I am having a revelation. My calm refusal seemed to unbalance her more than anger would have. She looked to my father for support. Son, he said in his reasonable voice, the one he used when explaining why my interests were impractical. You are overreacting. Come back to the table, have some cake, and we can discuss this like adults. Cake that does not acknowledge my birthday, I pointed out. And we have never discussed anything like adults, because you have never treated me like one. Jason stood up, straightening his expensive suit jacket. Curtis, you are making a scene. Think about Allison meeting the family for the first time. Is this the impression you want to give? I looked at Allison, who actually appeared more embarrassed by Jason's comment than by my behavior. I think Allison has gotten a very accurate first impression of this family dynamic, I said, perhaps more accurate than you would like. Uncle Frank cleared his throat. Diana, Robert, the boy has a point. This was supposed to be his birthday dinner. Stay out of this, Frank. My mother snapped. You have always encouraged his attitude. His attitude? Uncle Frank raised an eyebrow. You mean his desire to be treated with basic consideration? My mother ignored him, focusing her attention back on me. Curtis, you have two choices. Either sit down and be grateful for this lovely dinner we prepared, or leave until you can behave appropriately. The ultimatum hung in the air. In the past, I would have backed down, swallowed my feelings, and returned to the table. The path of least resistance had been my default for as long as I could remember. But with my grandfather's letter in my bag and his confidence in my pocket, I found a strength I had not known I possessed. "I will leave," I said calmly. "But not because I cannot behave appropriately. I am leaving because I finally understand that nothing will ever change here." My mother's expression wavered between triumph and uncertainty. She had not expected me to choose leaving. "Fine," she said finally. "Go, cool off. We will discuss this tomorrow when you are thinking more clearly." "There is nothing to discuss," I replied. "For 22 years, I have been trying to earn a place in this family. Tonight showed me that place does not exist." I turned to leave the dining room, but my father's voice stopped me. "If you walk out that door during Jason's celebration, do not expect things to be the same when you decide to come back." I turned back to face him. "That is exactly what I am hoping for, Dad." As I headed toward the front door, I heard chairs scraping as several people stood up. Footsteps followed me into the hallway. "Curtis." "Wait," Jason called. "You are being ridiculous. No one said you do not have a place in this family." I stopped and faced my brother. In his perfectly tailored suit, with his perfect hair and perfect life, he looked every inch the golden sun. But for the first time, I saw something else too. A trace of insecurity behind his confidence. Perhaps even a hint of envy at my willingness to break free. They never had to say it, Jason. They showed it in 1,000 ways, including tonight. My parents appeared behind Jason, both looking angry and confused. They had never faced real resistance from me before. "What did your grandfather leave you?" my father asked abruptly. Of course that would be his concern. Not my feelings, not the family dynamic, but what material goods might have been kept from him. Something more valuable than money, I answered truthfully. He left me his belief in me. "Spare us the sentimentality," my mother scoffed. Thomas was not in his right mind toward the end. "Whatever promises he made you, stop it," I interrupted, surprising even myself with my firmness. "Do not disparage Grandpa just because he was the only person in this family who saw me clearly. He filled your head with unrealistic ideas," my father insisted. "Made you think you could skip the years of hard work it takes to succeed." I shook my head, amazed at how they could so fundamentally misunderstand both me and my grandfather. Grandpa never told me success would be easy. He told me it would be possible. There is a difference. I reached for the door handle, but my mother moved quickly to block my path. "If you leave now, in the middle of your brother's celebration, do not bother coming back," she said, her voice cold. "I will not tolerate this level of disrespect in my house." I looked at her, this woman who had given birth to me, but had never really seen me, and felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. "Mom, I am not leaving to hurt you or to disrespect Jason. I am leaving because I finally respect myself enough not to stay where I am not valued." "Melodramatic nonsense," she snapped. "This is exactly why we have always had to be harder on you than on Jason. You are too emotional, too sensitive." Jason placed a hand on my mother's shoulder. "Mom, maybe we should all calm down. Curtis, why not stay? We can acknowledge your birthday too." "As an afterthought," I said. "No thank you." My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "That is enough. Diana is right. If you cannot show basic gratitude and respect for this family, then perhaps you need to learn a lesson about what life is like without our support." "I have been learning that lesson my entire life," I replied quietly. My mother's expression hardened. "Is that so? Then you will not mind if we stop paying your rent and tuition. The threat might have terrified me just hours earlier, before I had read my grandfather's letter. Now, it only confirmed I was making the right choice. That is your decision to make, I said. Just like this is mine. I reached for the door again, and this time no one stopped me. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my mother's final, desperate attempt to reassert control. Curtis Adams. If you walk away now, you are choosing to turn your back on this family. I paused and looked back at them one last time, my red-faced father, my indignant mother, and my confused brother. For a moment, I felt a pang of loss for the family relationship I had always wanted but never had. I am not turning my back on family, I said. I am facing forward toward my future. There is a difference. As I walked to my car, I heard raised voices behind me, my parents arguing with Jason, and possibly Uncle Frank. I did not look back as I got into my car and started the engine. Only when I was halfway down the block did I allow myself to feel the enormity of what had just happened. I had stood up to my family for the first time in my life. I had walked away from their conditional support and their impossible expectations. And strangest of all, instead of feeling devastated, I felt light. The messenger bag containing my grandfather's letter sat on the passenger seat beside me, and I placed my hand on it as I drove, drawing strength from the connection to the one person who had truly believed in me. As I navigated the familiar streets away from my childhood home, I realized I was smiling. For the first time in 22 years, I was free to become whoever I wanted to be, without seeking approval that would never come. I picked up my phone at a stoplight and texted Dominic. Birthday dinner was a disaster. Can I crash at your place tonight? His response came immediately. Doors open. Bought beer. Ready to hear all about it. With a destination in mind, and my future suddenly wide open, I drove toward my friend's apartment, the weight of decades of disapproval finally lifting from my shoulders. Dominic's apartment was exactly what I needed that night, a safe harbor in the storm of emotions I was navigating. My best friend, since freshman year of college, he had witnessed enough of my family dynamics to understand what a monumental step I had taken. So you actually walked out? He asked, handing me a beer as we sat in his small living room. In the middle of dinner? I did, I confirmed, still somewhat surprised by my own actions. They replaced my birthday cake with a congratulations cake for Jason, and something just broke. Dominic shook his head. About time, man. I have been waiting for you to stand up to them for years. I took a long sip of my beer, letting the reality of the evening sink in. They threatened to cut me off financially. Shit, Dominic muttered. What are you going to do about rent and tuition? Instead of answering immediately, I reached into my messenger bag and pulled out my grandfather's letter. I might not need their money anymore. I explained about the letter and its contents as Dominic listened with growing amazement. Your grandfather left you his entire architectural firm? He asked incredulously. The same firm that designed half the notable buildings in Boston? Not the entire firm, there are other partners, but his controlling interest. Yes. Plus his personal accounts and his house in Cambridge. Dominic let out a low whistle. Holy shit. Curtis, you are set for life. It is not about the money, I said, realizing the truth of this as I spoke. It is about what it represents. Grandpa believed in me enough to entrust me with his legacy. He saw something in me that my parents never did. So, what happens now? You just walk in tomorrow and take over? I shook my head. No. There are legal processes, meetings with his attorney. I will need to finish my degree, learn the business from the inside. Grandpa laid it all out in his letter. He has been preparing for this for years, apparently. Does this mean you are rich now? Dominic asked with a grin. The question made me laugh, breaking some of the tension I had been carrying. I have no idea. I guess I will find out when I meet with his lawyer. We stayed up late, talking through the implications of both my family confrontation and my unexpected inheritance. By the time I fell asleep on Dominic's couch, I had begun to form a plan for the days ahead. The next morning, I called the number my grandfather had provided for his attorney, Margaret Wilson. Her secretary arranged an appointment for later that afternoon. Wilson and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown office building with impressive views of Boston Harbor. Margaret Wilson herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, who had apparently been expecting my call. "Curtis Adams," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thomas spoke of you often. He was very confident in your abilities." She led me into a spacious conference room where she laid out several folders of documents. "Your grandfather was meticulous in his planning," she explained. "He began transferring ownership shares to a trust in your name 4 years ago, when you entered architectural school. The process was designed to minimize tax implications and ensure a smooth transition." Over the next 2 hours, Margaret walked me through the details of my inheritance. The scope of what my grandfather had left me was staggering. Not only did I now own controlling interest in Adams' architectural design, but the firm was far more successful than I had realized, with offices in 3 cities and dozens of active projects. "There are conditions, of course," Margaret noted, indicating a section of the will. "You must complete your architectural degree, and you will work with the current managing partners for a minimum of 2 years before assuming full control." "That makes sense," I said, relieved that I would have time to learn the business. "Thomas also left you this," she said, sliding a key across the table. "To his house in Cambridge. He suggested you might want to live there while completing your studies." I picked up the key, remembering the beautiful Victorian home, where I had spent so many weekends learning from my grandfather. The thought of living there both honored and humbled me. "There is one more thing," Margaret added, removing a sealed envelope from her briefcase. "Thomas left this for you, to be delivered once the legal matters were explained." I opened the envelope to find a short handwritten note. "Curtis, if you are reading this, then Margaret has explained the practical aspects of your inheritance. Now, for the important part. This is not a gift. It is an investment in your talent and character. I have watched you grow into a thoughtful, creative young man despite the challenges you have faced in your family. Those challenges have given you a perspective and empathy that will make you not just a good architect, but a great one. The firm is now yours to lead. But remember that buildings are ultimately about the people who use them. Design with both practicality and compassion, and you will carry forward the true legacy of Adams' architectural design. Your proud grandfather, Thomas." I blinked back tears as I carefully refolded the note. Even now, my grandfather was teaching me, guiding me. "He thought very highly of you," Margaret said quietly. "In the 30 years I worked with Thomas, I never saw him as confident about anything as he was about your future." After leaving the attorney's office, I drove directly to Adams' Architectural Design. The firm occupied a renovated warehouse in the Seaport District. Its interior, a thoughtful blend of historic industrial elements and modern design, exactly the kind of adaptive reuse my grandfather had championed. I had been to the office many times before, but always as Thomas Adams's grandson. Now, as I approached the reception desk, I was something else entirely. "Curtis." The receptionist, Eleanor, greeted me with a warm smile. "We have been expecting you. Let me tell Michael, you are here." Michael Chen, the managing partner who had worked alongside my grandfather for 20 years, emerged from his office moments later. "Curtis, good to see you. Please, come in." As I followed him through the open office space, I noticed several employees watching curiously. Many of them knew me, but clearly word had spread about my grandfather's succession plan. In Michael's office, I found not just him, but the other 3 senior partners as well. All had worked with my grandfather for years, and all were looking at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to cautious optimism. "Thomas told us about his plans for you," Michael explained once I was seated. He made sure we understood that this was not nepotism, but a carefully considered business decision. "He believed in your design philosophy," added Sarah Jensen, the partner who headed the firm's residential division. "He showed us your work, the sustainable housing project, especially your approach to community integration that was impressive." I was stunned. My grandfather had been advocating for me behind the scenes, sharing my work, preparing these accomplished professionals to eventually accept me as a colleague. "I know I have a lot to learn," I said honestly. "I am not coming in expecting to take over immediately. I want to earn your respect, just as my grandfather did." The tension in the room visibly eased. Whatever they had been expecting, perhaps an entitled heir demanding control, it was not this. "Thomas left a detailed transition plan," Michael explained. "You will work in each department, learning all aspects of the business while completing your degree. After graduation, you will join as a junior partner with specific project responsibilities. The full transition of leadership will happen gradually, as you gain experience." It was a thoughtful plan, exactly what I would have expected from my grandfather. He had not just handed me an opportunity, he had created a path for me to grow into it. As the meeting concluded, Michael walked me through the office, introducing me to staff members I had not yet met. "This is Curtis Adams," he told them, "Thomas's grandson, and the firm's future leader." The words sent a strange thrill through me. Future leader. Not because of my last name, but because my grandfather had seen my potential and had believed in my ability to carry his vision forward. That evening, I used the key Margaret had given me to enter my grandfather's Cambridge home. The beautiful Victorian was exactly as he had left it, from the architectural books lining the study to the drafting table by the bay window where he had first taught me to draw. In the study, I found more evidence of my grandfather's confidence in me. A drawer in his desk contained folders labeled with project names, notes, sketches, and ideas he had been saving for me. One folder, labeled Curtis's first major project, contained preliminary sketches for an urban community center, with notes about sustainable materials and community engagement. I sat at his desk, surrounded by the legacy he had left me, and for the first time since his death, I allowed myself to fully grieve his loss. He had been more than a grandfather to me. He had been a mentor, an advocate, and the father figure I had needed. As I wiped away tears, my phone buzzed with yet another call from my parents, the 5th since I had left their house the night before. I had not answered any of them, needing time to process everything that had happened. This time, however, I answered. "Curtis?" My father's voice sounded strained. "Where are you? Your mother and I have been worried sick." "I doubt that," I replied calmly. "But I am fine. I am at Grandpa's house." There was a pause. "What are you doing there?" "I live here now," I said simply. Another, longer pause. "Curtis, about last night, things got out of hand. We all said things we did not mean." "I meant everything I said," I replied. "And I think you and Mom did too. That is why I left." I could hear my mother's voice in the background, demanding that my father put the call on speaker. A moment later, her voice came through, clearly. "Curtis, this rebellion has gone far enough. Your brother feels terrible that you ruined his celebration. You owe him an apology." Some things never changed. Even now, their concern was for Jason's feelings. "I will not be apologizing to Jason," I said. "If anything, he should apologize to me for never once in 35 years standing up for me or acknowledging how I was treated in our family." "This is absurd," my mother snapped. "You need to come home right now. and we can discuss your behavior." "I am home," I said. Grandpa left me his house. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father spoke. His voice suddenly interested. "What else did he leave you?" The naked calculation in his tone confirmed everything I had felt the night before. "They did not care about me. They cared about what I might have received that they thought should have been shared." "Enough," I answered truthfully. "Enough that I will never need to rely on your conditional support again." "What does that mean?" my mother demanded. "What did Thomas leave you?" "That is between me and Grandpa," I replied, echoing my words from the night before. "I will be fine. You do not need to worry about me anymore." "Curtis, you are being incredibly selfish," my father said. "Your grandfather's estate should be shared among family. Your mother is his daughter, after all, and yet he chose to leave his most valuable assets to me," I replied. Perhaps he had his reasons for that. The conversation deteriorated quickly after that, with my parents alternating between demands to know exactly what I had inherited and attempts to make me feel guilty for abandoning the family. I remained calm throughout, a new strength in my voice, as I repeatedly declined to be drawn into their manipulation. Finally, when it became clear I would not be swayed, my father issued an ultimatum. "If you do not come home and work this out with us, Curtis, you are choosing to separate yourself from this family." "No, Dad," I replied softly. "You and Mom made that choice for me years ago. I am just finally accepting it." After ending the call, I walked through my grandfather's house. Our house now exploring rooms filled with books, art, and architectural models. In his bedroom, I found a framed photograph on the nightstand that I had never seen before. It showed me at about 10 years old, intently drawing a building, while my grandfather looked on with unmistakable pride. He had kept this photo by his bed, this moment of connection between us. Not fancy degrees or professional awards, but this simple image of a mentor and a child sharing a passion. I placed the photo carefully back on the nightstand and whispered to the empty room, "Thank you for believing in me, Grandpa. I will not let you down." 6 months passed in a blur of activity and transformation. Living in my grandfather's Cambridge home gave me not just a place to stay, but a connection to his legacy that inspired me daily. Each morning, I woke in the sunlit master bedroom he had once occupied, surrounded by the books, art, and architectural models that had shaped his vision and were now shaping mine. True to the plan my grandfather had created, I divided my time between completing my final year of architectural studies and learning the business side of Adams Architectural Design. The firm's partners, particularly Michael, proved to be patient mentors, honoring Thomas Adams' wishes by guiding me through every aspect of running a successful practice. "Your grandfather was right about you," Michael told me one evening as we reviewed project proposals. "You have his eye for detail and his concern for how buildings affect the people who use them. But you also bring something new, your generation's understanding of sustainability and community integration." These words meant more to me than any praise my parents had ever reluctantly offered. Here, among my grandfather's colleagues, I found the professional family I had always craved, one that valued my actual talents and contributions, rather than measuring me against an impossible standard. In March, about 4 months after my dramatic exit from my parents' house, Architectural Digest published a feature article about emerging talents in sustainable design. To my astonishment, my student housing project was prominently featured. "Adams shows promise of continuing family legacy," the headline read. The article included quotes from respected architects, praising my innovative approach to affordable housing, and mentioned that I was the grandson and successor of Thomas Adams, one of New England's most influential architectural voices. 3 days after the article was published, my parents called. It was the first contact since our tense conversation the night I had moved into my grandfather's house. "Curtis," my father began, his voice unusually conciliatory. "Your mother and I saw the article in Architectural Digest. Congratulations. That is quite an achievement." The praise sounded foreign coming from him. Awkward and forced. I thanked him politely, waiting for what would come next. "We have been thinking," he continued. "Perhaps we were too hasty that night. Family disagreements happen, but they should not cause permanent rifts." I said nothing, letting the silence grow until he was forced to continue. "Your Uncle Frank mentioned that you have taken over your grandfather's position at the firm." We had no idea Thomas was planning something like that. And there it was, the real reason for the call. The article had revealed the extent of my inheritance. And suddenly, I was worth reconciling with. "Yes," I said simply. "Grandpa had been preparing me for years. He believed in my potential. Well, your mother and I have been talking, and we would like to have you over for dinner. To celebrate your success, we can invite Jason, too. He has been asking about you." I considered the invitation, weighing the hurt of the past against the possibility of a healthier future. "I appreciate the invitation," I said finally. "But I think before we can move forward, we need to acknowledge what happened. Not just that night, but throughout my life." There was a pause. Then my mother's voice came on the line. "Curtis, we have always wanted what was best for you." "No, Mom," I replied gently but firmly. "You wanted what was easiest for you. Supporting Jason's clear path was simpler than nurturing my different one." "That is not fair," she protested, but with less conviction than she would have shown 6 months earlier. "Perhaps not," I conceded. "But it is how I experienced growing up in our family. If we are going to have any relationship moving forward, that reality needs to be acknowledged." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, oscillating between defensive justifications and tentative admissions. It was not the full reckoning I might have hoped for, but it was a beginning, a first crack in the wall of denial that had characterized our family dynamic for decades. We ended with a compromise. Instead of dinner at their house, which carried too many loaded memories, we would meet on neutral ground, a restaurant in Cambridge, the following weekend. Jason would not attend this first meeting. This needed to be about my relationship with my parents. The dinner was awkward, but civil. My parents seemed genuinely shocked by the extent of my grandfather's planning. He never said a word to us. My father repeated several times and alternated between impressed by my new position and concerned about my lack of experience. "I am not running the firm alone," I explained. "The partners are mentoring me, just as Grandpa arranged. It is a transition, not a takeover." By the end of the evening, we had reached a tentative truce. They had not fully acknowledged the favoritism that had shaped my childhood, but they had listened to my perspective with less defensiveness than ever before. Small steps, but significant ones. As for Jason, our reconciliation took a different path. 2 weeks after my dinner with our parents, he called me directly. "So you are the heir apparent to Grandpa's empire," he said, attempting a light-hearted tone, but not quite succeeding. "Pretty impressive, little brother." "It is not an empire," I corrected him. "It is a responsibility." "Right." He paused. "Look, Curtis, I owe you an apology. I never realized how much Mom and Dad, well, how much they focused on me at your expense." His acknowledgement, however belated, meant more than I had expected. "You were a kid too when it started," I pointed out. "It was not your responsibility to correct their behavior." "Maybe not then," he conceded. "But I was an adult for the last decade or more. I should have said something." We met for coffee the following weekend. Without our parents present, Jason was more forthcoming about his own experiences growing up as the golden child. "It was not all great, you know," he admitted. "The expectations were crushing sometimes. I was terrified of failing, of disappointing them. Every test, every application, every job interview felt like life or death. For the first time, I saw our family dynamic from his perspective, the suffocating pressure of being the designated success story. "I envied your freedom sometimes," he confessed. "The way you could pursue architecture without them micromanaging every decision. They only gave me that freedom because they did not think it mattered," I pointed out. He nodded. "I know. That was wrong of them. But now look at you running Grandpa's firm, while I am still checking boxes on my parents' approved life plan." This new perspective on my brother, the recognition that he too had been damaged by our parents' approach, shifted something in me. The resentment I had carried for years began to dissolve, replaced by a more nuanced understanding of our shared history. Over the months that followed, I established new boundaries with my family. I visited my parents occasionally, but kept the interactions brief and on my terms. With Jason, I developed a more authentic relationship based on mutual respect, rather than the hierarchical big brother divided by little brother dynamic that had defined us previously. Meanwhile, my professional life flourished in ways I had never imagined possible. Under the guidance of Michael and the other partners, I completed my architectural degree while simultaneously learning the business operations of the firm. My first major project as a junior partner, a community arts center in a revitalizing neighborhood, broke ground in May, incorporating many of the sustainable design principles I had developed in school. On the personal front, I found myself building new relationships based on genuine connection rather than desperate need for approval. Through a colleague at the firm, I met Eliza, a landscape architect whose vision complemented my own. Our professional collaboration gradually evolved into something more personal, a relationship built on mutual respect and shared passion for our work. My 23rd birthday arrived, with none of the drama that had marked my 22nd. I celebrated quietly with Eliza, Dominic, and a few close friends at my grandfather's, my home in Cambridge. No elaborate decorations or fancy cakes, just good food, meaningful conversation, and people who valued me for exactly who I was. As I blew out the candles on the simple cake Eliza had baked, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous year behind me, the painful birthday that had become a turning point, the inheritance that had provided not just financial security, but a vote of confidence when I needed it most, the slow, imperfect healing of family wounds that might never fully close, but had at least been acknowledged. My grandfather's words from his letter echoed in my mind. "You have always lived in the shadow of your brother, not because you lack talent or character, but because your parents could only see one kind of success. Now is your time to step into the light of your own making." He had been right, as he so often was. The past year had been about stepping into that light, not with resentment or rebellion, but with purpose and clarity. I had discovered that true success was not measured by others' recognition, but by the alignment between your values and your actions. The pain of my family's favoritism would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. Instead, it had shaped me into someone who noticed the overlooked, who valued different forms of contribution, who understood that genuine support meant seeing people for who they actually were, not who you wanted them to be. In the end, my parents' replacement of my birthday cake with Jason's congratulations cake had not been the tragedy it felt like at the time. It had been the final push I needed to break free from a toxic pattern, to claim my own path, and to discover that I had been worthy of celebration all along. As my friends raised their glasses in a birthday toast, I silently thanked my grandfather for seeing what no one else had seen, for believing in me when no one else had, and for providing not just an inheritance of property and position, but the far more valuable inheritance of confidence and purpose. Some people spend their entire lives seeking validation from those who are incapable of giving it. My journey had taught me that true validation comes from within, reinforced by those who see your authentic self and celebrate it not despite its differences, but because of them. That was the real inheritance my grandfather had left me. Not a firm or a house, but the knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was. And that was worth more than all the birthday cakes in the world. Has something similar ever happened in your family? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against unfair treatment? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they are enough, exactly as they are. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery and healing. Until next time, remember that your worth is not determined by others' ability to see it.